Managing 3.5 billion in media, empowered by creative automation, data, and AI. DEPT partners with the world's most influential platforms every day. Whether that be to enhance brand recognition, outperform performance marketing, or improve customer loyalty, we never hold back. We're decoding data from millions of ads across 165 countries and connecting every touch point in the customer lifecycle, from social to search and from retail media to CRM, to deliver actionable insights, ROI-focused strategies, and lasting relationships. ADA, our proprietary MarTech platform, offers over 100 world-class solutions, delivering personalization at scale and utilizing AI for smarter decision-making while respecting people's privacy. Our team of 2,000+ media, creative, data, and AI experts worldwide are pioneers in brand consumer communication, crafting award-winning campaigns that add fuel to the fire of business growth.
Hello and welcome to Growth Week. I'm Molly DeVille, your host for today, and when I'm not doing that, I'm also Growth Director at DEPT. We have been around the world with Growth Week. We've been in Berlin, Amsterdam and Copenhagen this week, and now we are live from a very blustery and rainy London. So thanks everybody in person for battling the weather to make it out today. And thank you to everybody on the live stream with us online as well. For those of you that are online, please check out the DEPT desktop where you can find out about our timetable for today. You can check out exclusive growth marketing insights, and you can also connect with our speakers. But without further ado, let's talk about why we're here today. Marketers everywhere are faced with a really big challenge, and that challenge is driving growth in what is a very uncertain economic climate. And alongside this, they have challenges trying to reduce costs while having increased pressure to have proven marketing-driven revenue and marketing-driven growth. No easy feat. At DEPT, we passionately believe that the best way to tackle this challenge is by being growth-led. And what we mean by being growth-led, put really simply, is by combining channels and team members to take an unsiloed approach across strategy, across implementation, be that brand and performance, media, tech, and creative, to really push every growth lever to help you get to that next stage in business. So, we have a fantastic set of speakers with us today, and lucky for us, they're going to share their wisdom with us about how we can take an unsiloed approach to growth. First up, I'll be in discussion with Toby Foy from eBay, Gareth George from RVU Group, and Rich Burgess from Just Eat. And we'll be talking about tips and tricks to break down silos and also their hands-on experience with this in their business. Next up, we have a tag team. We have Kevin Veman from DEPT and David Iwanow from Reckitt. These two will be chatting to us about the future of search. There is a huge amount going on in search at the moment, and we can really capitalize on that disruption and turn it into opportunity by taking a total and one search approach. For our live stream viewers, that's where we'll be ending things today. But for those in the room, we have a couple of breakout sessions as well. One that's on content and one that's on retail media, and I'll direct you to those at the end of this session. We also have some beers, bites, and nibbles at the end, so stay around for some chats. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists to join me up on screen. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I have given a very brief intro and not done you justice at all. So would you like to introduce yourself to people here and the people at home? Rich, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody, I'm Rich Burgess. I work at Just Eat Takeaway and I look after all of the digital creative strategy and development globally across multiple markets, multiple channels and thousands of deliverables.
Hi, I'm Toby Foy. I've been at eBay 2 years now. I've been at eBay for 2 years now. Head of Media Investment and Strategy. That involves sort of overseeing all of our media investment, whether it is bought in-house or with our agency partners, or whether it's sort of upper brand budget or lower funnel sort of performance media.
Hi, I'm Gareth. I'm part of the RVU group, part of the media team there. RVU, for those of you who aren't aware, predominantly the the customer-facing brands that includes is Confused.com, Zoopla and Uswitch. Pleased to be here.
Fab. Should we get into our first question? And it is a big, old, meaty one as well. What are the key challenges facing marketing teams today that are impacting business growth? Gareth, shall we go to you first?
Yeah, I can give you a really pointed response, Molly, which is predominantly the greatest challenge that I think we face is equity at a board level, equity at an investment level. Marketing is increasingly, amongst some businesses, being seen as a nice to have and a pot of cash that can be sort of reined in and taken back with no real cost to the business. I also think that as the years have gone on, the role of CMOs and chief investment officers has slightly been demeaned. And I think it's very hard to run a business without somebody and without a voice for marketing at the top, understanding that if you want to grow, which is why we're all here and what we're here to talk about, you have to invest. You have to understand that you can't grow on a shoestring. And I was speaking to Matt, my colleague at Zoopla earlier, and that's the key point is having people at that level who understand what marketing does, how it fuels a business, how it drives growth. And I'm not saying spend money for money's sake, but treat marketing with the same respect and the same equity and agency that you give increasingly a lot of other functions in a business. So I think until we crack that, the next couple of years are going to be quite tricky for us as marketeers.
Yeah, we hear that with our clients kind of time and time again, and trying to prove different things. So do you think that you have the same kind of problem, Toby, or slightly different challenges facing teams today?
I mean, we definitely have that same challenge in protecting marketing budgets. I think there's a lot of belief in lower funnel budgets, and they're a little easier to fight for. So our challenge is maybe more about protecting the upper funnel, particularly in the current environment, which I would probably say is eBay, or certainly my main marketing challenge at the moment, is the economic climate, but then also the climate as well.
Yeah.
Because the shift in consumer spending and confidence has been quite volatile this year, as has the weather, which for a business where we need to forecast, plan and execute based on things that we know and traditional seasonality, it's just been incredibly difficult. And it's forced us to go a little bit back into sort of the COVID times where we're a bit more reactive, which to me then makes it even more difficult to protect those upper funnel budgets, which we talked about. So yeah, I think it's a combination of those two from our point of view.
Yeah. Rich, how about you? How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I think there's a level of talking to more people, right? Like as you want to grow a business or as you want to engage more people, it's about how do you talk to those people in different channels, in different places. And I think when you look at something like TV is a large broadcast media, can speak to a lot of people in one place. You tap into then digital and social channels, and you've got to start looking at different creatives for different channels, different ways of talking in different channels, and then different audiences within those channels. So you want to talk to Gen Z, and you're looking at more platforms like TikTok. You want to talk to a broader audience all the way through to 60. You're looking at Meta, and then to the guy's points around budgets. How do you then make sure you've got the right budget to talk on each of those channels with different creatives to engage people in the right way, that they're then going to start to like your brand or feel a synergy towards your brand, and then start to buy or purchase what your brand offers. And I think it's really difficult when you've got to test some things, to prove some things, to get the budget, to then do it all again. And when you've done that for one channel, you'll then have to start doing it on another channel that maybe has just emerged, or you've had on your plan for 3 years but just haven't been able to convince maybe somebody to help invest in that area or grow to that kind of channel in terms of audience. So I think, yeah, as we see more channels get added to the mix, and therefore a broader audience that we want to speak to, and in kind of more unique ways, the budget side on both a media and a production only gets thinner and thinner.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a climate of people and brands being risk averse at the moment, and then when it comes to brand new platforms popping up which actually have a really big audience reach, and some channels that might be struggling to get the same reach that they did before, trying to convince people to take that risk and almost a leap of faith is hard. It's tricky. Which
also you or others within the business may never have used before as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're all doing it with testing and learning and working together to get an outcome, which I guess goes on to the kind of siloed point of making sure everybody is working together to bring that to the fold.
Yeah.
The dilemma is these test channels and innovation and risky things are the things we really need, certainly at eBay at least, because they give us the cut through, they allow us to stand out, but at the same time they're the really difficult ones to sell and also demonstrate that they work. So we want to continue down this road, but yeah, next year is going to be a bit tough to keep these things on the plan.
Yeah.
And I think on that point as well, I think that lack of a single source measurement solution, particularly, that sort of weeds itself through the entire process, particularly at getting marketing buy-in. I said earlier, 10, 15 years ago, most of us who've been around that long could do the job pretty much with our eyes closed, but now how you actually have to demonstrate that X is delivering value, that X is important to be incremental on the plan because it delivers Y. At the moment, the silos that exist outside of marketing departments and agencies, the silos that exist within the industry as a whole, is really, setting us back, and it's, if anything, undermining the case for investment rather than proving the case for these new channels, as Toby says.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to agree on the best way forward, how we measure, instead of arguing about the best way of measuring. So moving on to our second question, we are seeing a lot of trends of our clients trying to break down silos in teams, whether that's a setup or whether that's on project, by bringing the right tech, media, data, creative, product, whatever you'd like to call it, minds together either at strategy or campaign inception phase. Is this an approach that you're adopting across teams? Rich, over to you.
Yeah, I think we do historically have multiple different teams doing multiple important roles that do need to join together, especially when you're working across the global function that then works with local functions, to make sure everybody's doing what each market needs and each individual area needs. I think for us, a huge thing that we've been developing together with the DEPT team is through creative automation and Project Sunday, is how do we actually make sure that all those teams are connected on that journey. So Project Sunday as a creative automation tool from briefing all the way through to delivery of media wouldn't work if you didn't have the right creative strategies in place, the right creative brand guidelines with our studio team, the right media connections with our overall kind of media teams, but then also with the local market briefs for actual local nuanced consumer messages, product messages, restaurant messages. So for us, it's quite a complicated process from start to finish, but we've had to make sure that even though we're in individual teams with individual directors and potentially different strategic goals for the business at different points, how do we make sure that we're all not working in silo, because otherwise something will break within the overall kind of flow. So you won't go from creative through to delivery. You'll only deliver creative and then never get it out in media, or media won't be getting what they need from a creative perspective. So yeah, I think it's probably our biggest area where we've really kind of changed the way that we probably previously would have been siloed and could have still been siloed, because without that flow needing everybody, you'd probably still go down the manual route where you could deliver certain things and never knowing what's going live from a creative perspective. That's down to the media team. So it's kind of a pass on rather than a flow from front to end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and team responsibility as well.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and team success when it goes well.
True.
Toby, I know you have been implementing different kind of structures within eBay, and you've now got a mic as well, so you can tell us all about
much
it.
like the mic, I've got a lo-fi solution at eBay. Ours isn't tech or data. Ours was a bit more operational. So a couple of years back, we were having real challenges with working as a collaborative team across the different departments, and I'm talking not just marketing, it's very much beyond marketing. So we introduced a squad model, which is a cross-functional team, which we branded squads. And it took a while, it wasn't easy to get up and running, but the ethos behind it was that we would have these squads dedicated to categories or big work initiatives, and they would be empowered to work cross-function to make decisions and develop campaigns and address problems within that team. And this has been something that's been very successful for us in improving our output and addressing some of the concerns. The particular ones for us were marketing at eBay was sort of traditionally was media and brand, and comms and trading were separate, and there was friction quite a lot at the time. And there was also a lot of examples where we had a strategy and we were trying to implement campaigns and creative and media spend behind it, and then we'd get curveballs from comms coming along saying, we're doing this event, or you put media behind it, or trading going, we want you to support this. So all valid ideas, obviously, but it just meant that we were diluting the funds, we weren't pushing in the same direction. So this shift for us has changed things. We get behind bigger ideas, everyone's pulling in the same direction. There's less debate and friction, and it leads to more successful output. And this is something that we did in the UK 18 months ago, and is now the challenge of rolling it out globally. So we're trying to instill our model on Germany and the US, which is not easy. The US is a very different world, and we're finding that there is like a culture of you work within your silo and you protect your own. We've sort of discussed what drives that, and it's maybe the increased job security we have in the UK with our long notice periods maybe gives us that confidence to go out of our swim lane and do things that are a little bit beyond our day-to-day role, whereas bringing others on this journey is not as easy, and we sort of assume, just follow our model. So we're sort of in the middle of making it a little bit of a bigger thing within eBay.
Yeah, not easy changing ways of working. Sounds it in principle, but never is it? And Gareth, maybe a different perspective from your point of view, working at a group level. How are you going around breaking silos, and is this something that you've been trying to do? Yeah,
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said already in terms of practical examples of how to overcome them. I think there's two different types. I think there's structural silos, and then there's cultural silos. And I think structural silos are natural, right? Because we all have a job, we all have a job description. Some people want to sit quite comfortably within that, other people want to sort of go over and above that. I think culturally, if you're in a business with very, very ingrained and deep silos, that's an incredibly dangerous place to be. I think if you're, we've sort of shot the breeze about this. I think if you're in a business whereby people are, for example, arguing about budgets or protecting a budget that they want to own versus budget that might be better spent elsewhere, culturally that's an absolute bloody nightmare, right? And I think that's where businesses increasingly are going to struggle and going to fail and going to lose competitive advantage. The one point on silos culturally that I think is important is the name and the terminology of stuff. That we've suddenly out of nowhere created this this phrase performance media, which I don't know what that means. It means it sells some stuff or something like that, whereas all marketing inherently should sell stuff either now or later, or should protect the sales that you've already got. So I think structural silos are fine to a point, and there's some brilliant examples practically where you can knock them down. But culturally, if you're in a business where those silos are really impending and hurting your day-to-day trading and your future trading, then at a leadership level, someone's got to take a long, hard look at themselves and ingrain a culture that everybody's just trying to sell the same product, just do that,
I would say that's true, and I think they were 2 points that we had to get over at eBay. One was there was some quite fraught meetings between these teams to get to this point. There were some arguments, and it sort of broke down those barriers. But the other one was it was driven by our CMO. Like, she was a huge advocate for it and pushed it through, and we wouldn't have got the backing. People wouldn't have got behind it if that hadn't been the case. So I think, I'd agree that that's a necessity.
Yeah. Well, moving on to kind of some of the more practical examples that Toby and Rich, you guys shared in terms of the ways of working and the processes and the squads and the actual project and physical thing that you're using in terms of Project Sunday. How have you seen growth? Do you think it has driven growth for your business?
I mean, from our point of view, the examples we point to are things like Love Island. That was something that 2 years ago wouldn't have been signed off. It was a long-term project, required multiple teams to work in sync, and it crossed quarters. eBay worked reactively in a rigid quarterly process, and teams wouldn't back the same idea. It was a bit, no, our idea is better and invest behind that. But Love Island, and it was a long-term view, and it got everyone working behind that same piece. Everyone fed in, and it was reshaped and adjusted to fit the comms angle and the trading side of things, and also media and brand. But it allowed us to have a more succinct idea and really get behind it. And I talked about it before internally, and I've come from agency side, and you sort of hear about these ideas from an agency perspective, and you think that's quite impressive that all of that's happened. When I've moved client side, the amount of people that have to get involved and actually be like wedded to making this a success is incredible. So, and if we hadn't have broken down these barriers and created these squad models, we wouldn't have done Love Island. And the other one I would say is that we've tried to move this to the global way of doing things, and as I said, it's not been easy at the moment, and we're still working through it. But what it has allowed is cross-market opportunities as well. So it's enabled, selfishly from the UK perspective, to do things like we did Vogue World recently, which was a partnership with them, which gave us amazing access to talent and some incredible editorial and content that went alongside it. We wouldn't have been able to do that as a UK team. We needed the joined up working across the different markets to make things like that a reality. So it's definitely helping us.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's a little bit baffling how many people are involved in one project, and how many people you have to convince, and how many different versions of one deck you have to create to take everybody on that journey. I think one of our, going back to, I guess, creative automation and Project Sunday, one of the goals for that was, how do you do stuff, how do you produce just as much or more but cheaper, but not create worse assets or go against brand guidelines or do any damage to the brand. So for us, it was actually about how do you grow, how do you do more messages with the same budget, the same kind of view of what we've got to create. So it was more about how do you reduce spend, not spend so much on creative production all the time on this kind of wheelhouse of creative, which then means that you can have different creative to test in media, which then we know obviously we can look at how you can achieve the lowest CPO in certain channels with certain messages in certain creative. So all of those parts, I guess, are connected. I don't know if we'd ever be able to connect all of the dots to work out the overall kind of saving or spend versus output. But we certainly try to look at that on a quarterly basis of what have we achieved, how much have we saved, what could it have been if we'd have built everything manually. And therefore, the overall goal to get more creative into more channels to deliver against our objectives.
Yeah, ultimately an efficiency play, more money to play with to put into other growth driving initiatives or whatever, testing like you say. Yeah,
I don't know if we've screwed ourselves over a little bit with the amount of now creative we do output, because it's there and you can do it, right, and it is cheaper, so you're like, well, why don't we do more? So it's about scaling it as well and doing it in the right way with the right amount of creative. But
yeah, exactly. And I'm sure lots of people listening are pretty envious of what you've managed to achieve. So what collectively kind of would be your advice in helping people break down those silos, whether that be at a leadership and boardroom level, Gareth, or whether it's squad level or on a specific project, and but like Project Sunday. So I guess Gareth, should we go to you?
I think Toby's point was spot on. The fact that ultimately it's got to come from the top, right?
Yeah.
It's got to come from the person in the business who's got the equity in the agency to talk about this stuff, set a team up, structure it as they want to. If you don't have that sponsor, if that person does not have the gravitas to do it, silos are going to exist forever. And pretty much, in my experience, and this is probably a career limiting thing to say, that the weakest bosses that I've worked for have been the people who've kept a department in very strict silos, because they maintain utter control then at that point. I think, if you look at, a brilliant, fantastic team at Zoopla at the moment, it's very much culturally unsiloed. Like Matt there is the brand media manager who works all the way through the funnel with his colleagues, and it's very, very unified. And that's very much because the culture's come from the top, that's how the business should operate. And that's how the team is going to be more and more effective. I think if you don't have that buy-in at that level, it's not happening.
Well saved.
I think I wouldn't disagree with that point in terms of you do need the more senior members of a team to drive people to work together, and to the points that the guys were making earlier, to make sure that people do have those difficult conversations and kind of piss people off a little bit. And I'm pretty sure I did some of that when I first joined to make some change that needed to happen within our world. But I think for me it's about bringing every single person you possibly can on that journey, and Gareth said it and Toby said it, it's hard at times, and there is a lot of people to bring on it. But I think also, as you said earlier, Molly, you also then all get to revel in the success. So everybody feels part of that journey, whether that be that they've attended 5 meetings or whether they've been a part of every single kind of process-driven change and driving it themselves. I think still making sure that you've tapped into every single person that's going to help you get to that end goal, and bringing them from the start to the finish means that everybody feels like that product becomes theirs. Whether they've played 100% a role or a 5% role, it doesn't really matter, because without it you wouldn't really get to the end solution. So I think there's a great thing in Just Eat Takeaway culture, I think, where so many people want to work with each other and will collaborate together, and making sure that you are all together on that.
And not wanting to repeat myself with the squad structure, the other thing that's really worked for us, which...
But I think the other point culturally is a growth from a career aspect. If you sit there at a table and, exciting broad roles.
Couldn't agree more.
Using AI within Project Sunday and certain ways of QCing things and looking at things and pulling in data, but actually we've also found that without a human throughout most of that process, you still wouldn't be able to get to the end goal yet. I don't know if in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years it could, but I think for us, yes, we're open to looking at all different ways that it can help from an efficiency perspective, from looking at different parts of the different stages within what we do, whether that be looking at assets, creating assets, writing copy, whatever it be. We'll explore all of those, but I don't think it's going to take anything overnight, and we certainly haven't seen that happen, although we've adopted it in certain areas.
Yeah, I agree with the human aspect. I used it to write a letter in an argument about buying a house, and the level of aggression was way beyond where I was comfortable with. But from an eBay perspective, we are exploring it. I think it's knowledge gathering a lot of the time at the moment, and relatively conservative tests and rollouts. We seem to be not as close to the tech and the engineering side of things, but we tend to be focusing more on an efficiency perspective, whether it's for the customer. So you can now use AI to help you generate descriptions within the app in some of our markets, which is a useful product feature, and we've messed around with it, and it is quite accurate and does save time. And then from a comms and a messaging point of view, sort of using it to help with text copy, which can be quite labour intensive, and can throw up some interesting tweaks around that. And then also exploring how it can help us make adaptions to assets that we need to produce in volume with small changes.
I think the best thing about AI is people have stopped talking about the metaverse, which is probably, which is good. I agree with everything that's been said. Personally, at a human level, I think marketing should be the last place in which we're looking at AI. I think we should be using as much of it to break gene sequences and fix people who aren't very well. That's where it should be pointed. I agree with everything that the guys have said. I think there are going to be areas where they are labour intensive, quite pithy tasks, particularly in data, whereby AI can have a useful point, but to a point. I think Rich's point is absolutely spot on. We've got to mark the homework to start, right? This is, you would never let a toddler loose in a department, so let's not let an unproven thing. If it can help with some certain tasks, fantastic. But fundamentally, we need to be very, very careful what we wish for, because I think if you read a lot of the trades at the moment, the forecasts that they have what's AI going to be doing for us in 10 years' time, well, the industry won't need us anymore. So I think we've got to be very, very careful what we wish for.
Yeah, I think to that point at DEPT, we're using it again from, I guess, efficiencies perspective for clients, but then also making sure that there's that human level and there's that human checks. I think in certain channels it can be used quite a lot, such as SEO, for example, and doing research and maybe a bit of like the top level planning. But yeah, we definitely have use cases for it here. But yeah, when is that human interaction and making sure that that's being checked and QA'd and whatnot. Great. Well, brings us on to our final question and wrapping things up. In a brief sentence from each of you, looking to next year, what are you excited about? What are you apprehensive about? Toby, should we start with you in the middle?
Yeah, going full circle, it's the economic climate again from an eBay perspective. We had Claire Barrett from the Financial Times who came in to speak to eBay, and a wonderful talk, but incredibly depressing. And she described the outlook as, like she used the metaphor of Table Mountain, and this is going to carry on for a long time, and everything we're seeing reflects that. So for me, it is worrying in that we need to keep adapting to this change and this lack of customer confidence. But at the same time, it's exciting because eBay is very well placed to service that. We can deliver value to customers. We just need to find a way of being more agile to the sort of the volatility that I mentioned earlier in the market.
Gareth, what are you excited about, scared about?
I'm excited because I think, to Toby's point about the uncertainty that we're in, I think if that ends up in us building marketing campaigns or executions and products that are better for the customer, that help customers through what is a pretty horrid time for all of us at the moment, then I think that's an opportunity for brands to stop talking about being a force for good and actually be a force for good. The things that scare me are fundamentally that the industry has not equipped us, and I mean agencies and clients, with measurement solutions that allow us to properly, robustly showcase marketing revenue and marketing growth. But that being said, I find it quite exciting that we can work on that, and when we crack that, it will be a generation of marketeers that will be remembered, I think.
Yeah, I think probably that's one of the things that I'm most excited about is we're doing more on more channels with more opportunity with different placements, different media spends, and the opportunity then to be able to start actually analysing that, looking at what we've done over the last couple of years and the steps we've taken to get to where we are, and actually start to look at how is it changing, how we should plan for 2025, and where could be the opportunities to invest, shifting it from certain channels to other channels. I feel like we're kind of on that precipice of that being a big kind of change and a big shift that might happen, and I think then that opens up more doors from a creative perspective, and it'll probably break down even more silos from a performance team through to a trying to just purely drive awareness. So I'm quite excited about the shift that I think can be made in that measurement space. What am I? Not sure. I'm scared now. Gareth's told us we all might lose our jobs at some point if AI does carry on. But I'm confident in his view that it won't happen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and challenges, fears, and what you're excited for next year. That concludes our panel for today, and we will be now going to our keynote speech, which will be on the future of search with David and Kevin. So I will welcome them up.
Hey everyone, we'll be talking about where search is going to go. And with AI creating metaverses and search happening in those metaverses, I think the panel will have a lovely time. Now let's actually take a step back. Do you remember how search worked in 1998, the year Google launched Google? When we still searched the web with keywords, and as a webmaster, we could actually tell Google what the keywords were that we wanted to rank for. If we look at how search actually looked like, it's these 10 links. You couldn't buy them, they were all organic, and the search engine, well, it looked kind of similar to today, but we'll get to that. In 2008, fast forwarding about a decade, Google first introduced universal search, as they called it. You wouldn't just have text links, you would have rich media formats like images, and what was new and hot was that YouTube was completely integrated in the search. But most importantly, as a webmaster, a website owner, you couldn't directly influence the search results anymore. It was up to Google and the algorithm. In 2013, image search was a default part of what we used the web for. We searched for images, and it was pretty normal. A couple of short years later, Google actually introduced Google Lens, going from, you can go from text to images, to actually images to images, and searching text in images. So you can see the development and the evolution there. And then the pinnacle of search, the paradigm shift we were all waiting for, we could use voice search to search the web. We mostly use it to go like, hey, what's that song called? Na, 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 na. Didn't really work out just yet. Or did it? Well, I'll let this little girl tell us. Shame the audio isn't playing.
You can do the voiceover.
Yeah, I can do the subtitles here. No, so what this girl is actually asking her Google Home speaker in this case is, do you understand me? Because the search assistant isn't doing what she's expecting it to do. And I think that's an experience we all, well, recognize somewhere. This was voice search in 2018. But then for me, the biggest change in the last few decades came. And that's searches like this, giant rocks in a circle. What does that actually mean? Do you want to see a pile of rocks, or do you want to see Stonehenge? Google started to include natural language processing and understanding intent in searches. For me, this was the biggest evolution in search. You could actually talk to a search engine like you talk to a human. Explain things and the search engine would pick things up. But it's not the paradigm shift that we expected, right? If you look at 20 years of development, going from keywords to, hey, intent is understood, we're not there quite yet. Oops. Oh, sorry, that was one click too much. What has happened though, and I think that's an important realization, is that in 1999, a year after Google launched, we had about 3.5 million searches a day. Fast forward to this year, and it's 2,000 times more. 8.5 billion searches every single day. And that is, I think, the biggest change. We all have that mobile phone in our pockets, having access to search every day, every moment of the day. And 83% of consumers today start their customer journey, their product discovery, on the search engine. Not all on Google, but on the search engine. And the biggest question is, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that trend where everyone always has that phone in their pocket? Well, Google switched only 3 years ago to mobile first indexing, so it's still quite new. But how does a company like Reckitt deal with what's happening today, but also what's happening tomorrow? Before I ask David to share that with us, we have a little video explaining how Reckitt deals with search. Hopefully the audio works.
Our shopping journey usually begins with a simple Google search, which is a lot like browsing a virtual aisle of digital shelves full of goods just waiting to be found. When you encounter an unexpected foul smell in your kitchen, it prompts a product discovery journey as you search for a solution online. People use search engines with customer-like language to find answers to their problems. This is where their product discovery starts. After a problem is identified, consumers start looking for solutions, like how to get rid of that bad smell in the kitchen. Consumers don't only look at text-based answers, they expect how-tos in rich content formats like videos and images. Now that these products are part of the customer's solution, it's time to consider the available choices, where the consumer matches them with personal tastes and selects the product that best meets their needs, leading to an in-store or online purchase. This is not a unique story. In fact, 83% of customers start their journey in this way when they're discovering a new product. But here's the catch. Reckitt brands only show up on those digital shelves 2.5% of the time. And that's why the Global Search Program aims to increase visibility for consumers when they're in the market, in need of a solution, and ready to meet a Reckitt brand that offers them a solution.
So now it's my turn. So thank you, Kevin, for that. So I guess we'll just quickly touch on that video. So that was prepared for a recent brand building forum that we held in Amsterdam. And when we talk about our share of digital shelf space, we're tracking around about 250,000 keywords in Google, but we own about 800 websites. So when we're talking about our visibility, we're looking at a category search and non-brand searches. But again, from a growth opportunity, it shows there's a huge amount of additional reach we can get with our consumers. So I guess the key thing around, this is not doing anything, the evolution of search, it can actually start to allow people to consume search in different ways, because not everyone wants to read text articles. You know, we've done some consumer research, and a lot of times the consumers want video content, or sometimes they want audio content or infographics. So I think the key thing around what's happening in Google is there a shift towards providing different medium to address different types of consumer demand, but also different learning styles. From a brand perspective, there's also the zero-click result. So if you monetize your website through display media, this type of result may not be great for you. But if you're a brand, this is a perfect result, because I'm able to answer the consumer's query. If they click to the website, it's a bonus. But again, the main result that we want is to be able to quickly and easily answer the consumer's queries. And if they want more information, they can obviously click to into our retail brand sites, or they can walk into their local Tesco's or Walmart. So from a branding perspective, I don't mind zero result searches as long as they look good for my brand and as long as the information displayed there is accurate. And again, the whole thing around the zero click. There's a lot more results which are actually showing up. You know, we have all the people also asked. But again, these are also rich insights the brands can start to take on and actually start to build that type of content, because Google's giving you hints as to what types of other queries consumers might be asking about your product or vertical that you may not be answering on your website. So I think the other benefit from us as a brand, the evolution of Google gives us a lot more data signals that we wouldn't have got in the past. Whether you use that or not is up to you. I guess the key thing around, humanizing search. So when we look at the evolution of search, which Kevin talked about earlier on, we started the old school was Boolean. So when you first started using Google and search engines years ago, you had to be a tech genius. You had to do and, or, all these types of queries. You'd have to put things in brackets and quotation marks, and it was very difficult. Google started moving more towards free search and natural language. But also then it started evolving, autocomplete, auto-suggest, as well as linked searches. So what Kevin talked about before. So large circle of rocks. Where is that circle located? Google knows that you're looking for information about Stonehenge and may offer a map result. And then you might ask questions about what is the best time to visit. So as Google starts to evolve through the journey, it actually empowers consumers with a lot more information, but also from a branding perspective, that means you need to create a lot more content. So in the past, one article might have done fine, whereas now you might have to look at 10, 15, 20 articles to address a particular topic, as well as rich media, YouTube videos, as well as display images. But that also opens up a lot of opportunities for us as brands. We can create a lot more content to have a lot more digital touch points with the consumers. And again, from both a paid and organic perspective, it allows us to have more connections with our consumers before they need to make that purchase of our products. The other thing is also, I think Google's getting a lot better at understanding intent. So the old days, people typically search for a used car. Then they might have got a bit more advanced. They looked for a used BMW M3. Then they're looking for a used BMW M3 in Southwark. So as Google's kind of got better, consumers are able to create a lot more complicated queries, but sometimes the results shown for the websites are limiting. So I think that's the big thing which is coming from, the Gen AI stuff, that Google can take a lot of that information on the website and reconstruct it to give the answers to consumers. But again, a lot more content is needed to feed the beast. So the elephant in the room, Gen AI. Again, there's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of excitement. Again, it's the first time that people actually outside of search industry ask you, what is this Gen AI and how do I use it? So it is a big game changer for certain parts of industry. But again, I think it's very much at the start. And the way I typically look at it, it could also be voice search. Years ago they said voice search by 2020 would be 50% of queries. Most people, if you use voice search, the results aren't really great unless you're asking what is the weather. If you have an Australian accent, sometimes, play Green Day, it tells you about pygmy goats. So again, there's limitations. The same thing with Gen AI. It's very much at the start of the process, so we'll get significantly better. And we've already started to see situations when it first launched, it would sometimes do results showing from our Detel Irish site and sometimes Australian. So it didn't really understand geography that well. So it is getting a lot better. But again, I think it's still got a few more years before it will make a significant change in consumer behavior. But what it actually does, Gen AI is starting to produce much more rich results for consumers, which again keeps consumers a lot more engaged with the content. Also from Google's perspective, they keep them within Google. But if we look at these two particular queries, we can see it's the same result, but if we look at the Gen AI version, it's much more consumer-centric language. So the advantage of Gen AI, it has the ability to take your content and make it much more enticing, maybe warm, fuzzy, use consumer-centric language, use, geographic-based terms, and use slang terms depending on where the query is being done.
Yeah, and on the left is the normal version, and on the right is the variant where generative AI is actually playing around with the results.
We'll actually go for the zoomed-in version. So as we can see here, the first result is, mild Italian sausage, cheese, tortellini, white wine, chicken. That doesn't sound that enticing. Versus this cozy soup features a rich tomato broth, cheesy tortellini, and Italian sausage. So we can already start to see from a consumer perspective, instead of just reading a list of ingredients, you're actually giving some information about this. So if I'm cold, that soup might be suitable for me. So that's, I think, the big thing for Gen AI. It allows the content to be surfaced for consumers to be much more consumer-centric. It can also take a lot of raw data, and again, typically a lot of these rich results, just list the ingredients. It can now say, well, this particular one features lots of vegetables. Or you might say, well, actually, I don't want a soup that contains cream. And that's the power of Gen AI. You can start giving more information back into the search engine, and it'll actually start to customize the results in a much better format, similar to what Boolean used to offer, without being a scientific genius. And this is sort of what we look at, an example for the Gen AI rich results. So it can actually take very, very, very common questions, such as which is the best pair of trainers or sneakers to run a marathon, and it can take a lot of information to digest it. And if we look on some of these results, it doesn't actually talk about it. But Google's able to vacuum up a lot of information to actually see other sites, which is referencing the top, have mentioned this particular brand or product is great for running marathons. So that's the other thing behind Gen AI. It can take a lot of raw information and simplify it for consumers. So again, what we've talked about before, sometimes the actual results aren't always localized. As we can see from the example here, it talks about Fahrenheit, and this was a result done with a British IP address. So it isn't always perfect. It is getting a lot better. We did a couple other tests, and it was actually using UK specific language and UK specific metrics. But again, there's still always a little bit of a gap. Sometimes it will use consumer-centric language. Sometimes it'll just use the raw data, which potentially is coming from Wikipedia. So I think the key thing around this as brands, why do we care about Gen AI? We need to feed the beast. We need to provide it with content. And for now, that main source of content is our brand websites. The favorite topic.
The favorite topic.
So it is one thing that I'm very conscious of, and again, we talk with DEPT on this topic as well. Should you be using Gen AI for content creation? So some of the things we're looking at is how we can use it to check existing content, but at the moment I'm still very much a believer in, I don't think it will replace human writers yet. There is platforms, if you're a large e-commerce provider, you can actually scalably produce much better meta titles and descriptions. But generally, I think the issue I face with using public available data sets, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you are going down the path of using Gen AI to produce your own content, you need to work with people like DEPT and make sure you use a private instance and feed in your own content so you can ensure a certain level of quality, and it's potentially not going to take stuff maybe from Reddit or 4chan, which is always interesting. Yes, so I think one of the last type of points, we've got a few more slides, so there's always more. There is a rise in a number of publishers and also e-commerce providers which are blocking Gen AI. And the reason why, if you're an example, years ago I spoke to the team at Hostel World. They had 500 million reviews. So if you have 500 million reviews and that's all ingested into the tool, are you still needed? So there are travel providers out there which are jumping on board with this, and they're able to say to Google or OpenAI to say, well, actually, we've got 500 million unstructured reviews. Can you help structure this data? So there is valid means for some of these data sets, but you do need to be aware there will be a number of publishers and e-commerce providers that won't benefit if they don't need the consumer to click to visit their website, and they can get the results straight from Google.
Yeah, because the biggest challenge here is that search engines don't just crawl the information and ingest it and show, hey, this website has this information, but they use it to reprocess and use that information for their own benefit and not necessarily for yours, right?
And don't always credit with a link.
Exactly.
So I guess, do you want to take this slide?
Sure. So the big question that we end up having to ask ourselves is classic search the future? Is the way we used to interact with search engines the way we are going to interact with search engines in the future? And is a search engine still a search engine? Because if you look at the advent of, well, we briefly touched upon it earlier in the panel, but the advent of other channels, take a TikTok, also launching search ads. Product discovery on platforms like that is becoming bigger and bigger, especially under younger age groups. So the way people search is fundamentally changing on a platform or in the media it's exposed on, but are they still behaving the same? What's funny is that in 2022, Google did a big survey, and they found that about 40% of younger people use platforms like TikTok to do the discovery. And if you go to the next slide, David, you actually see the numbers on the right. I'm not sure if everyone in the room can read it, but at home I think you can. You'll see the differences between the different platforms and different age brackets, how people orient themselves. And I think, David, you were wondering a while ago, how is that for Reckitt, and do people that purchase Reckitt products behave the same way, right?
Yeah, so that's, I guess, the key thing. So I got the question of, does every consumer think about Google first? And my view is yes. I'm a SEO person. I love the amount of traffic Google can send to a website. But we actually survey consumers. And what we found across our different brands is that Google, while still the prominent provider of information for consumers, for one brand, Amazon was actually much closer in terms of a source for information. So as I said, a couple of brands significantly ahead. But for one of the brands, but again, I guess as I said, we talk about evolution of search. For that particular brand, we know in 2024, they need to consider Amazon SEO higher in their priority list than they might have done in the past. So as I said, I think from brand's perspective, if you don't have this information, there are platforms out there, Pollfish, SurveyMonkey, survey your consumers, ask them these types of questions. So instead of going back to your meetings and say, well, I know there's a 2013 search engine land post on this and there's some eMarketer data from 10 years ago, run surveys, find this information out. And some of the other things, we actually ask these consumers, what types of content do you prefer? And then we even ask them what types of articles. So if we have a backlog of 200 articles that DEPT can create with us, we now have a priority list of which content our consumers said they would prefer. We can then match that with the search volume. And now we have a much better refined list of what types of topics we need to prioritize for our brands.
Yeah, which you can actually see here as well in other words, because it's sequential from left to right, is that consumers don't actively realize that the socials are influencing or have a preferred status in their product discovery, right? So it's also a subconscious channel that they touch upon when doing product discovery.
The last point I want to add about the search stuff. So the big thing that I've noticed recently, and again, it hasn't been talked a lot about, Google is putting a lot of resources into trying to make Maps its own search engine. So Google already has Google and YouTube, which is the second biggest search engine. They now want to make Maps a much more searchable platform. So what are the top 10 restaurants? What are 10 things to do in London? So again, I think they'll be interesting to see how that adapts and sort of changes over time, but it could be the fact that Maps local SEO could be the next best thing for the next 2 to 3 years in line with generative AI.
Well, and that brings us to our conclusion, or our big question actually. Are we seeing a paradigm shift happening? Is Gen AI the next big thing that will really change the way we search? Is it an evolution? If we look back at the last 20 years of search, and also starting all the way in 1998, what are the fundamental changes in how we use that search engine? They're not that big. The way we interact with, or the frequency of which we interact with search engines has definitely evolved. But basically it's still those 10 blue links that we started out in the beginning.
Plus the ads.
Plus the ads.
Yes.
So, and if you can give me the clicker for a second, David. It's mostly about this, right? Looking back, has it fundamentally changed? Well, it was content then that made rankings happen. It is content now. The way we interact with that content and the types of content have changed, but basically it's still about that content. So our conclusion in all of this is actually that content is still king. The way we consume that content, that's different, but content is still king. And this is what we wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our speakers today, and I hope everybody is taking home some real actionable insights, tips and tricks that were shared. As I mentioned earlier, for those at home, unfortunately, that's where we'll be leaving you today. For everybody in the room, we have 2 fantastic breakout sessions. We have one on content, which is around how you can use process, tools, to fuel creativity. And then we have another on retail media. As Kevin and David just spoke about there, we see a lot of audiences in some retail media platforms such as Amazon. So they'll be talking about how you can leverage those. But for now, please join me in a big round of applause for our speakers, and thank you very much for joining us today.